a 6th-string rookie stranded in Tokyo and ready to quit just 2 weeks into his NFL career. But one snap, in a meaningless preseason game, sparked a career that not only led him to the Hall of Fame, but also rescued a struggling franchise. Without Terrell Davis, there is no back-to-back Broncos Super Bowls, no John Elway riding off into the sunset. This is the story of how a nobody became the greatest playoff running back in NFL history, and how he transformed an entire franchise forever. What are you saying, guys? It's Zane here. Let's get into the video. It's August 1995. Terrell Davis is sitting at a Tokyo hotel when he makes a decision. He's ready to retire 2 weeks into his rookie year. He goes to the front desk to ask when the next flight out of the city is. This is 1995, there's no Google flights. Thanks to Davis's inability to speak Japanese, go figure, he couldn't communicate with the staff. So he thought to himself, what the heck, I might as well just stay. I can quit once I fly back with the team. The Broncos were set to face the 49ers on August 5th, 1995. It seemed waiting to return with the team was a waste of time, because as time passed in the third quarter, Davis still hadn't played a single snap. So he did what any reasonable person would do. Stuff his face with hot dogs and enjoy the game from the sideline. He had a great view after all. There was just a slight problem. After consuming those dogs like it was a contest, the special teams coach let him know he'd be joining the kickoff coverage team. That hit, catapulting Tyron Drakeford into the air and sending him flying 3 yards backward, literally kickstarted a Hall of Fame career. A hit that got him noticed, enough to get him the starting role. Before this play, nobody knew his name. Given he was drafted 196th overall, that wasn't too surprising, because the reality was, he was lucky to have even made it to the NFL. Following the death of his father at age 14, struck with grief, Davis quit football and his life quickly spiraled. During one night after an altercation, he found himself staring down the barrel of a shotgun. He managed to defuse the situation, but when he returned home, he realized God offered him a wake-up call. He took that call seriously. He transferred to Abraham Lincoln High School, returning to the field his junior year. Initially playing nose guard and kicker, Davis was powerful, but it was his speed that led his coach to move him to running back his senior year. He joined his brother by committing to Long Beach State, but after the 1991 season, the football team was disbanded. His career should have been over. This is Long Beach we're talking about, not a place scouts are very active. He rushed for just 262 yards. To Davis's surprise, however, Georgia would come calling, but he didn't stand out during his time there either. A hamstring injury in his senior year put him out for 6 games. To make it worse, he frequently clashed with his head coach, which fostered a less than ideal relationship. That was evident when he wasn't allowed to stand on the sidelines during the games while he was injured. Instead, he had to sit in the nosebleed section. Looking down onto the field, Davis told himself, when you get another chance, make the most of it. He realized the importance of seizing any opportunity he got. To his credit, he did, rushing for 113 yards against Auburn when he returned. Still, his college career wasn't capturing the attention of many teams, at least not enough to get him drafted in the earlier rounds. The player selected right before him finished his career with 16 carries for 54 yards. Once again, the odds were stacked against him. But that game in Tokyo marked the start of an electric rookie season as Davis rushed for 1,117 yards, which at the time made him the lowest draft pick ever to rush for 1,000 yards. Davis's trajectory was only up. His rushing yards increased each of the next 3 seasons. But Davis's legacy would be made in the playoffs. A legacy that, in my opinion, not only saved the franchise, but more importantly, saved John Elway's career. Without him, there's no way they would have won back-to-back Super Bowls. Let me explain. In 1996, the Broncos finished first in the AFC with a 13-3 record. Davis and the other starters got some rest during those final few weeks. However, the rest might have led to rust, because the Broncos were upset in the divisional round by the Jags. In 1997, the Broncos finished 12-4, thanks in large part to the 1,750 yards and NFL-leading 15 touchdowns by Terrell Davis. More importantly, this time the Broncos weren't getting bounced in their first playoff game. Coach Mike Shanahan had concluded Davis didn't run enough against Jacksonville. It was 25 attempts from here on out, and that would be true in all but one of Davis's 7 remaining playoff games. His 112 attempts in the 97 playoffs still ranks second all time. That, unsurprisingly, translated to a lot of yards. Davis rushed for over 100 in each game en route to Super Bowl 32. But the NFC was in the midst of a 13-game Super Bowl winning streak. The Packers had just won the year before and looked primed for a repeat. They were 11-point favorites. The first quarter was close, both teams got a touchdown, and then the Broncos tried to capitalize on a Brett Favre interception. Terrell Davis had rushed for 64 yards at this point, but then...
I think Davis may be shaken up. Terrell Davis is on both knees. This would be bad. Costly for the Broncos.
His vision began to blur. He knew what this was. He'd been dealing with it for most of his life, a migraine headache. Yet even blind, Davis was a menace. Shanahan sent him in as a decoy, allowing Elway to scoot in for a 1-yard rush. Thankfully for the Broncos, he'd return for the second half. fresh as a daisy. In one of the greatest Super Bowl performances ever, he finished the day with 157 rushing yards, set a Super Bowl record of 3 rushing touchdowns, and won MVP as the Broncos upset the Packers. While owner Pat Bowlen's declaration of "this one's for you, John" was true, the win was thanks to Davis. Elway completed 12 passes for 123 yards, Davis rushed for 157 yards and 3 touchdowns. That would complete a season where he set a then record for most rushing yards including the playoffs. So here's why I think Davis saved the franchise. Prior to his arrival, the Broncos lacked a true number 1 back. The team had relied primarily on Elway up to this point, who had already dragged them to 3 Super Bowls. When Mike Shanahan was hired, he knew he needed a run game to take the load off Elway, but they didn't have a worthy starter. With the emergence of Davis, the offense was complete. Of course, the team was loaded, it's not just him, but the Broncos won 91.7% of their games in the regular season and playoffs when Davis rushed for at least 100 yards. In Elway's own words, "We wouldn't have taken the final step without TD." It's also not hard to argue Davis was the greatest ever in the playoffs at his position, but we'll circle back to that. As the Broncos continued winning into the 1998 season, Davis had his sights on an individual record, 2,000 rushing yards, something only done 9 times in NFL history and only 3 times to that point. In 1997, the year prior, Barry Sanders rushed for 2,053 yards. It seemed like Davis could join that exclusive club as well, but the Broncos had cruised to a 13-0 record before dropping 2 of their final 3 games. Given they were blowing teams out so frequently, Davis sat out a total of 8 quarters. That almost derailed a historic season, because after a season-low 29 rushing yards in Week 16, 2,000 yards seemed very unlikely. He had exceeded that mark twice that season, but this was a meaningless Week 17 game. Is it worth risking an injury? Well, he already had bruised ribs, so why not go for it?
He's behind Elway by himself. He takes the handoff, running left. Terrell breaks a tackle. He's got it. There it is. Terrell Davis is mobbed by his teammates on the sideline. He has just become only the 4th player in NFL history to go over 2,000 yards in a single season.
The 178 yards against the Seahawks put him at 2,008 yards for the season and earned him MVP. But how do you top an MVP 2,000-yard season? Rush for even more yards per game, set an NFL record for most consecutive games rushing for 100+ yards, break the record for most rushing yards in a season, including the playoffs, that you set just 1 year prior, and win another Super Bowl. Against the Falcons, the Broncos aired it out, but you can thank Davis for that. He was a decoy, a player the Falcons did their best to contain, and he still ran for 100 yards. Without Davis attracting the defense's attention, the Broncos would not have had as much success passing. Yet despite this dominant 4-year stretch, some look at Terrell Davis's career and argue he was a product of the system.
Terrell Davis, a very good player. In my mind, not a Hall of Famer because of how good that offensive line was for him during that time.
I can't get my head around how stupid of a sentiment that is. Should we just exclude Emmitt Smith for the same reason? That being said, the Broncos did have a dominant O-line, and their innovation in zone blocking did open up some massive holes for Davis. The success of running backs after Davis seemed to favour the skeptics as well. However, I think it's clear that Terrell Davis is a historic running back, one of the greatest ever, whereas these other guys had some productive seasons, but aren't going down as all-time greats. Is Marshall Faulk not as good because Steven Jackson came right after? Of course not. Not to mention Davis was putting up these numbers against the best teams in the NFL. In 5 of his 8 playoff games, his opponents had a top 5 ranked defense. Advanced metrics also favor Davis. Take DVOA, which shows how much better a player or team is compared to the average. Denver's rushing DVOA ranked top 2 3 of Davis's 4 years. The Broncos didn't crack top 5 after him. The average rushing DVOA before Davis's injury was 20.5%, and it dropped to 9.6% after. Now, if we're just to look at the playoffs, which again is where Terrell Davis really shined, the numbers are absurd. There are only 6 players in NFL history to rush for more than 1,000 yards. Despite everybody else on this list playing at least double the amount of games, he still ranks a close 6th. But if you adjust this to a per game basis, nobody comes close. Most yards per game, most yards per attempt, most touchdowns per game. I think that demonstrates Davis was in a class by himself when it came playoff time. Entering 1999, Davis looked primed to do more of the same. In his first 3 games, he rushed for 193 yards. He had signed a 9-year, $56 million contract the season prior. However, Davis would suffer a career-altering knee injury, tearing his MCL and ACL, trying to tackle a defender, returning an interception. He was never the same, playing just 17 games over his final 3 seasons. As Davis himself said, it's ironic how his career started with a tackle and ended with a tackle.